Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar brought to you by Sag Moraine Native Plant Community. Thank you all for signing up and for joining us. Before we get to the main event and the main guests, I wanted to just tell you about a few things going on with Sag Moraine, a few things that we're offering that are new since our last webinar. One thing is a few items that might be of interest to you that are now available on our website. One thing is called our ambassador tools, and these are, if you're on board with Planting Native and you'd like to spread the word to your neighbors, your friends, your municipality, your coworkers, your HOA, whoever it be, we have a list, a series of tools on our website now to help people spread the word about the importance of native plants for our ecosystem. Another thing that we have that's along those lines is our new native plant selector. Check that out under resources as well. And the unique thing about our new native plant selector is it is all plants that are, we all know that all native plants are beautiful, but they may not be so beautiful in our 1/8 acre lot. So these are plants that are conducive, will look beautiful, will be appropriate in smaller suburban landscapes, urban and suburban landscapes. So all the plants have been vetted, and if you choose from what is in that native plant selector, the plants will not take over your whole yard, will not be 10 feet tall, will look lovely in your smaller landscape. And the other thing I want to mention, and there's a link for both of those, the ambassador tools and the native plant selector, in the chat below. There's also a link for our second annual native plant sale, which will be held once again at Moraine Valley Community College. It'll be on June 3rd this year from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. We will have thousands of plants available there for individual purchase, all provided by Possibility Place Nursery in Monique. With that, I want to go ahead and introduce our very special guest tonight. Our first one is Adam Kreuzer. Adam is a local delegate at the International Dark Sky Association. This wonderful organization is trying to raise awareness and educate, and it's an international organization, as I said, trying to raise awareness and educate about the problems caused by artificial light pollution. And we're thrilled to have Annette Prince with him tonight from the Chicago Bird Collision Monitor. CBCM monitors. CBCM is a volunteer conservation project dedicated to the protection of migratory birds through rescue, advocacy, and outreach. It's an absolutely amazing organization, and I'm glad that you're all going to be able to learn more about the wonderful work they do. So with great expectation, I want to turn things over to Adam Kreuzer and Annette Prince. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Catherine. Hello, SAGs. Catherine, I think this might be our third year, if I'm not mistaken. So glad to be back. Let me make sure I've got my slideshow ready to go.
It is our third year, Adam.
So here we are with what would be our third presentation, 2023. And tonight we're presenting basically on migrating birds. So here it is, March 15th. We're probably maybe 2 weeks into migration already, spring migration already. We have with us tonight our special guest, Annette Prince. Say hello, Annette.
Hi, thanks for inviting us, or inviting me. It's great to talk about this because it's birds are on the way. This is a very timely topic.
Yeah, so Annette is with Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, and that's her website. Hopefully everybody here will visit it. We'll introduce Annette more as we progress. But first we're going to talk about me. I don't know that anybody knows yet, but we now have a Chicago chapter. The International Dark Sky Association now has a Chicago chapter, and that's our website down there, idachicago.org. So if all of you have an opportunity to visit it, I'd greatly appreciate it. You'll find a lot of good articles, a lot of links, A lot of good information. And this is the start of the show. So basically, this is our Saving Dark Skies show with an emphasis on bird migration tonight. Of course, the International Dark Sky Association is the mothership, and that website is www.darksky.org. So before we get into bird migration and everything else, I just wanted to remind everybody how nice it is to see a dark sky. You know, sometimes when we talk about all the effects of light pollution, we forget that most of the concern about light pollution started with astronomers who could no longer see the night sky. I think one of the most important things about all our efforts is to be able to see that night sky. And of course, right now we're looking at the Milky Way. And this is a view of the Milky Way from northern Wisconsin. When Van Gogh painted, he was painting in the late 1800s. At that point in time, it was pretty much just gas lamps. You know, he painted when, of course, we had a starry night. It wasn't until the late 1800s that Thomas Edison, who did not invent the light bulb, basically developed what was the first municipal effort to light cities, which was in New York. But again, that wasn't until the late 1800s. So here, and I know a lot of you have seen this slide before, but here you can kind of see the progression of light pollution. Only 100 years ago, from today, basically, only 100 years ago, everybody could see the Milky Way. We had completely dark skies. Now, the first image that we have here is from the 1950s, and you can see how dark it was back then. And what I always like to emphasize is, look at Lake Michigan. There's really not a light bulb on Lake Michigan, but you can see that we've got all that sky glow over Lake Michigan. And that's because that light that goes up, whether by reflection or just because it's not being shielded, is just exploding through the atmosphere through water molecules and so on and so forth. So it spreads and we get that dome of light pollution. And that's what we're kind of dealing with every night, especially here. I don't know if you're one of the lucky ones, but what amazes me when I do speak, and I'm speaking much more in person now, is when I ask people whether they've seen the Milky Way, many people, some our age, do not raise their hand. Currently, only 2 out of 10 people on Earth can see the Milky Way. Now, most everybody lives in an urban area, but still, it's frightening how many people can no longer see the Milky Way. Today, on the best of nights, if we were to go outside tonight, and it's a relatively nice night, I'm looking out my office window. If we were to go out tonight, we would only be able to see about 40 stars. So where we live here in Chicago, suburban Chicago, unfortunately, we can only see about 40 stars with our naked eyes. If not for light pollution, if we were to take ourselves back 100 years, we should be able to see thousands of stars with our naked eyes every night, even here in the city. And this is kind of a nice slide. It's a new slide. I haven't used it before, but you can kind of see the progression of what would be sky glow in the inner city, and then moving over to what would be a completely dark sky, maybe as we move up to northern Wisconsin or out west into Utah. So now we're dealing with that sky glow, and it's progressing more and more and more, not just in our suburbs, but in our more rural areas here in Illinois. And of course, we've got the Chicago sky glow. Chicago just switched out to LEDs. So now we're dealing not just with the light pollution from what would be the old sodiums, which were more amber, but we're dealing now with that bright white light. And that's what I'm going to emphasize a little bit. With LEDs, it's a whole new ballgame. And I like this slide. You know, the National Geographic published this, I think, more than 10 years ago about the end of night and why we need darkness. This is not a new issue. Fortunately, I think a lot of people are starting to become more aware of it, though. And I'm seeing a few more people trying to address it, which is exciting. And this is the LED problem that we're dealing with now. So if you look to the left, you'll see basically what we had with our lights before LEDs were introduced. Basically a more warm color. We kind of describe it as a more warm color, a red color. So when you think about, 1800s and all the years before, modern man has been here for only about 200 to 300,000 years. But still, that's a lot more than just 100 years. We always had that warm light at sunset, and then we went into natural darkness, and then we had that warm light at sunrise. Well, now with these LEDs that are on all night because of this white blue wavelength we're now being introduced to that we didn't have previously with our lights, we're basically having daylight throughout the day, even at sunset, through the night, and of course into sunrise. So we're dealing with that cool white wavelength now that we didn't previously have to deal with, and it's affecting us so much more dramatically, with our health and with birds and such. And of course, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. This is what we see now outside on the garages, on our porches, with our lamps outside. It's this bright white LED light. And unfortunately, we're just putting that bulb right into that fixture that we have always used, even with the more amber incandescents that we used to have. And we're having this problem so much more dramatically too. I like to brag a little bit that I've been able to convince some of my neighbors to go to a more amber color bulb on our street. And I've also been able to convince a lot of them to turn off their lights at night, but many people have that bright white light on all night. And as a result, of course, our neighbors are suffering. They can't sleep as well. They have to buy those basically night shades so that they can sleep. And really, should we have to do that? Why not turn off those lights, especially during bird migration season? Light pollution consequences. Usually I would spend a lot of time on this tonight, but we're not going to because I want to get to Annette. We would talk about energy waste. We would talk about all the money we lose when we keep those lights on all night. We talk about all the fossil fuels that we burn when we have a light on. And of course, we would talk about the consequence of that, which is global warming, but we're not going to talk about that tonight. I did want to talk a little bit about human health because I know a lot of people are very much interested in it now. And of course, this is a good example. Okay, we're being confronted again with that blue-white wavelength. So a lot of you have heard about how, you want to turn your handheld devices off at night because it's affecting how well you sleep. And of course, now we have these blue blocker glasses too to help address that. And it's basically trying to address what happens with that blue-white light when we have it at night, and what happens is we're affecting our circadian rhythm, and everything has a circadian rhythm, plants too. So it's really important that we have a good day because we want the bright sunlight at day. It energizes us, it provides us with our energy, but we want natural darkness at night. That's when we're restoring. We're getting ready for the next day. Our body is basically doing what it needs to do so that it can fight disease, so that it can stay healthy, so we don't get obese, so we don't get diabetic, so we don't have heart problems and things of that nature. Sleep is so incredibly important for our health. And I am hearing a little bit more about that, which of course is welcoming. And here's just your little circadian clock, right? When we have natural darkness, what happens? That melatonin gets released by our pineal gland. That triggers a healthy night of sleep. And hopefully we're going to get about 8 hours of good sleep every night. And if you have a chance, check out a book. It can be a little bit dry, this book, but it's a really good book about the importance of sleep to our health and the importance of darkness to contribute so that we can have that good night's sleep. So let's get to Annette, our star for the evening, ecological impacts. You know, often we'll spend a lot of time on turtles. We'll spend a lot of time on insects. I'm going to talk a little bit about insects. We'll talk, you know, we would talk about a lot of other animals that are affected by light pollution, but tonight we're going to focus on birds. And Annette, if you don't mind, I think I'd like to hand the baton over to you.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me at this point. And thanks, Adam. And all the things that Adam has mentioned they're all interconnected. We are going to talk about birds, but the insects, the other wildlife are all critical parts of a healthy environment and part of a chain that's going to be terribly impacted if we can't protect all the important parts of it. So I can speak today about the birds that are such a important as well as amazing part of our world that are traveling through a world that used to have darkness at night, but are now flying over a world that is increasingly more and more lit up. When we're talking about migratory birds, we are talking the majority of which travel at night, and they have evolved to use sky patterns and stars that they can see and perhaps cannot see the same way we cannot anymore. And they now have an additional brightly lit environment below them, which can be confusing and disorienting. Let's go to the next.
And that when you need me to switch to the next slide,
Yeah.
just let me know.
Oh, go next. So our group was founded in the late 90s. Chicago was getting brighter and brighter, and on nights of heavy migration, when buildings were heavily lit up with display lights that went up into the sky, we were finding hundreds or sometimes 1,000 birds dead at a building that left its lights on when birds were flying in the darkness along Lake Michigan, which was a natural boundary that birds followed. But during the nighttime hours, bright lights were drawing them towards buildings where they were striking the glass, dying from exhaustion from circling buildings. And Chicago initiated some light reduction programs, but not all buildings were participating, and there were still many birds on the sidewalks throughout the city in the early morning hours. And our group was formed in 2003. This is our 20th anniversary, to go out, find those birds, try to educate the people that are seeing these birds, who could perhaps make changes in the lighting and building designs that they have in the downtown area. And we are collecting up to 7,000 birds a year in just the 1 to 1.5 square mile of downtown that we look at. And we have monitors out in teams of up to 8 to 15 people each morning, looking for as many birds as we can find in the areas that we monitor. We know those aren't the only areas where birds hit, but we have to do what's logistically possible for our resources. And we know that if we're finding 7,000 birds in that 1 square mile, we're not finding everything. We're finding things we can't be everywhere at once. Birds are being taken by predators. Birds are landing on rooftops where we can't help them. And so if you are to multiply the thousands of birds that we find, you're getting into the tens of thousands of birds that die every year as they come through our urban area. As well as we've expanded some of our work into rescuing birds from other urban hazards. This was a bald eagle that was rescued on New Year's Day this year. He was sick from both levels of high lead and in addition to rodenticide poisoning, which are the other parts of urban hazards that we are introducing to the detriment of the wildlife in our areas.
Yeah, Annette, I saw this on the news a little bit. What happened to this
He ended up dying. He unfortunately was so seriously debilitated when we found him. He was found floating on an ice floe in the middle of Waukegan Harbor. He was too depleted to even move. When we went out there, we had someone with a kayak that pushed him in, floating on that ice floe so that we could gather him up and get him to rehabilitation. But at a certain point, he was severely emaciated. He had multiple conditions that were causing his condition to decline. So unfortunately, it's an immature bald eagle that did not survive to turn into part of the breeding population, which once again, the species relies on, having healthy individuals that can grow up and perpetuate the species. Next.
Okay.
So light is a problem. Light's a problem when it's coming out of a building, something as much as the tribute and lights that New York City has put up in honor of the Twin Towers that went down at 9/11. And someone instituted this as a memorial to the tragedy that happened on 9/11 in New York City. But unfortunately, these two beams of light go up. The first time they went up was a month after in 2001 on October 11th. And ever since, these two beams of light go up on September 11th. And those are peak migration times. Thousands of birds have died from being attracted to just these two beams of light. They have tracked birds that have veered off their course far away from New York City, but seeing these two light beams that are going up into the sky have pulled birds many miles because of the confusion and attraction that we don't completely understand. But birds are pulled toward these lights almost the way you see insects attracted to a porch light or a candle flame. Birds, I think it disorients them. I think it sets off something that's a light imbalance that they've been using for hundreds of thousands of years to navigate. And now there's this new light source that is messing up how their brain processes light to orient themselves in their travels at night. And we really feel that New York is pretty bonded to having this display up. I feel that they could perhaps institute something else as a tribute and a memorial, because I think a memorial to senseless loss of life should not cause more senseless loss of life. So we're hoping that at some point they may institute a different way to honor the lives that were lost at 9/11.
I think they actually have to turn these off from time to time during the memorial, don't they? To let the birds
They now
fly.
have, yeah, they now have bird
release.
watchers that come, and if they see a lot of birds trapped circling hopelessly in the lights, they turn the lights out so that the birds can disperse and leave, and then they turn them back on. But to me, that has wasted a lot of birds' energies to come there to get trapped, as well as the fact that, I mean, I think that even if they did it up until 11 o'clock, they could have the tribute during the hours that, as we say with a lot of lights in the city, once people have gone to bed after 11, that display could go out. And that's when the majority of birds are traveling, passing over the city, and those lights could become less of a hazard if they can be even minimalize the amount of time that they are turned on in the city like that. Okay, next. So, as I said, birds are passing over the city. They're usually navigating from lights that come from the moon or the stars, and especially under nights when there's a high cloud cover, those stars and moon will be harder for birds to see. They're flying below the cloud cover, and all they instead have are the lights that are below them that can bring them dangerously close to the buildings that have the glass, which is the ultimate danger for them. Next. Chicago is a particularly important area. We have the highest concentration of birds flying through our area than any other place in North America. By virtue of that, a recent study by Cornell measured the amount of light, urban lighting that the Chicago region has in combination with the millions and millions of birds that travel overhead each spring and fall to rank Chicago as posing the greatest threat to birds of any city in North America. Second to us, the only city that's second to us would be Houston, which is another city that's along this central flyway that so many birds are using, and that often has quite a bit of lighting going on. So we are in a critical location where so many birds could run the risk of being harmed because of the amount of light we have to attract them, and subsequently the amount of glass in our built environment. Next. And the majority of the birds that we're trying to protect are migratory. We do have birds that are here year round. We don't find them as much downtown, and certainly birds that live in a lit environment that have learned to live with us, with our buildings and our lighting, are less likely to collide. But the majority of the birds that we are seeing only spring and fall, which makes Chicago a kind of spectacular place to be, because we are host to 200 different species of birds that don't live here, but pass through this area, and the majority of them are traveling at night. Larger birds travel during the daytime, things like geese, Cranes. Right now we're seeing a lot of sandhill cranes going overhead. If people are bird watchers or aware of them passing through in the daytime. So we notice those birds, but they say in the nighttime on a heavy night of migration, it's almost as a carpet of birds overhead. It's so thick with birds that are flying. You can hear them calling with microphone registers. They can record the types of birds that are going overhead, and we are again host to millions of birds every year that need our protection.
Yeah, so I think they're basically eating during the day, fueling up and getting ready for the trip during the night. And
Exactly.
I think most of the birds that are migrating are beautiful songbirds, I think, Annette, if I'm not mistaken.
The majority are things like thrushes, warblers, different kinds of songbirds, hummingbirds, that they have to spend the daytime resting and refueling because they're not nighttime. They don't feed at night, so they need the daytime to do that refueling and resting, and they're traveling at night. It's cooler at night. One of the theories of why many birds travel at night is because it's cooler at night. And if you had to run 100 miles, would you want to do it in the heat of the day, or would you want to do it when it's cooler and less turbulent, which is what the nighttime offers for birds migration. So as I mentioned before, artificial lighting is something that seems to disorient birds. It draws them toward the lighting, causes them to circle or strike the confusing glass in the nighttime hours, and can cause them to veer off of their migratory paths, which, even if they don't end up striking something, is wasting valuable migratory energy. If a bird cannot simply fly safely through an area, they've put little radio telemetry antennas on birds and seen them flying high and safely above the city, and then all of a sudden they see them drop altitude and pull down towards brightly lit urban areas. And this is something that's wasting their migratory energy, because they already are doing a marathon of a sort by flying hundreds or thousands of miles, and they do not need the disorientation or attraction of nighttime lighting. Next. So it is considered migratory bird death from collisions is considered to be one of the leading causes of bird death. And most of these birds populations are plummeting for lots of reasons. There's the number one reason being habitat loss, because these birds are losing the places they need to breed as well as to winter. But the man-made additional causes include cats that are either feral, living outside all the time, or people who allow their cats to go outside. Cats are an unnatural predator that the migratory songbirds did not evolve with. Birds flew over North America. There wasn't a daytime predator for birds. Certainly birds had to be afraid of raccoons, nighttime animals that could hunt them. But during the daytime, when they were raising their young or migrating through, there wasn't a predator that came after them even during the daytime. We have brought cats to North America, so it's not a circle of life thing that cats would eat birds. Cats wouldn't naturally have been here in the numbers that we have increased them to. Window collisions rank from one estimate, 624 million, up to 1 billion birds a year. That number can't be measured exactly because we don't find every bird that hits a window, but we know that even if you said that everybody's home killed 1 bird a year, that seems insignificant. But you get up to 1 billion really quick if you let every home that has a window in it kill 1 bird. So those numbers are certainly enhanced and magnified in places where there are tall buildings that kill hundreds or thousands a year. And that's how those numbers can easily be extrapolated to such a high number.
Yeah, it's incredible that it's 600 million to 1 billion each year just in North America.
Right. And that goes, worldwide, we're seeing losses. Okay, next. So regardless of the light attraction, we certainly know that reducing lights causes less birds to drop down into urban areas. We are also talking about the real deadly encounter, which is with glass, which is our environment that is using glass more and more heavily, and birds are not able to understand that. It's both because glass is transparent and birds see a way in, as well as glass on the outside can be reflective and show a mirror that looks like a real image of a tree, and birds will fly into it. Lighting becomes important in buildings at night when birds are settling in after they've flown all night long. The outside of the city, this is a daytime shot, but a nighttime shot would show a darkened sidewalk area where birds don't want to be, and brightly lit trees on the inside of a lobby. So we have worked together with building managers to indicate that besides the bright lights that pour up into the sky that are deadly, the lights that are kept on inside of a building at night showing birds a display of trees that they might want to fly towards can cause a significant amount of death as birds are trying to get into the indoor fountains, lights. In the wintertime, we get owls that fly towards the Christmas trees that are displayed inside of lobbies. We see them lined up right in front of the tree that they were trying to get to, but had no awareness that there was an invisible barrier between them and the very inviting interior that they were trying to reach. Next.
Yeah, one of the things that really interested me was the birds that do come down to basically ground level that don't otherwise strike the buildings are looking at the trees inside those atrium and lobby windows as the place where they want to be, you know, when they are on the ground. So a lot of those strikes are happening not on the 100th floor of the Sears Tower, but on the ground floor.
Yeah, it's not the first thing that they're, it's not like they're coming in from the sky and boom, they hit the top of the building. We don't have a measure of all the places that birds hit buildings because despite the thousands of birds that we pick up, we fortunately or unfortunately do not see the birds hit. It's a pretty awful thing to watch a bird fly into a window at high speed. Birds can hit glass at 30 miles an hour, and it's like you going through your windshield like that. It's a terrible thing to experience. We are often finding the birds post strike, and we don't know if they hit up high or they hit down low, but the ones that we observe and the likelihood of striking seems to us to be occurring when they are either in outdoor landscaping and then getting startled toward glass or trying to get into interior landscaping, trees and fountains that look appealing on the other side of a glass wall. A study was done at McCormick Place, which is perhaps one of the most seriously dangerous buildings in Chicago for birds because it's not a high-rise building, but it is a lot of glass that sits right on the lakefront. And as birds are moving over the lakefront or along the lakefront, it's one of the first things they see. It's got the effect of almost like a lighthouse. And on coastal areas, lighthouses often have very deadly numbers of strikes because it's something that's pulling birds away from a darkened traveling path. And McCormick Place did a study for 2 years in which they turned off half the lights on one part of the building and left the other half on. And they saw almost an 80% reduction in the number of birds that hit in the areas where the lobby lights were turned off. So the simple act of turning off lights in a lobby when no one's using it, or having motion sensors such that when someone walks through that lobby, yes, they have lights. When no one's using that lobby area, the lights go off. Or drawing drapes, if that's the case, if there's a reason that the lights have to stay on all night long. Sometimes in McCormick Place, they say they have to leave the lights on for security because there's valuable property during a trade show there that they can't have a dark or safe display area without the lights on. The museum, McCormick Place has drapes that they could draw if they need to leave lights on, but they will not draw drapes. And so even though they did this study that proved that they could end bird death by 80%, they continue to leave lights on at night, as well as not drawing curtains, which they could do to make that a safer building without really affecting anybody. They could still have their lights or they could still save energy, but it's often a very great challenge to get people to want to turn lights off. And it's not as easy. It would seem like it would be a win-win. You save energy, you protect birds, you turn your lights out, but it's often a very hard argument to win with buildings. So our teams are out in the early morning hours to find birds that may have hit buildings when they first land after traveling all night. We're there to get the birds before they are run over by cars. We're there to collect them before predators come for them. Crows and gulls in downtown Chicago come out the minute there's any visible light to start hunting for these dead or injured birds to grab them and eat them. So we have a team of people that have increased from initially, maybe we had 12 people in our group back in 2003, maybe two people per day that ran everywhere they could. Now we're fortunate to have 8 to 8 to 15 people a day that are trying to cover as many areas as possible to find birds. And we've got such great participation from the awareness we've raised. The public calls us. People used to ask me whether I was catching butterflies downtown when they saw me walking around with a net like this. And now people come running up to me with a bird in their hands or a bird in a bag that they've already caught and bagged because they know they can find us, get these birds to us. And so our success in getting these birds safe before it's too late, because they're hurt by hitting the glass. And in your own backyard, if a bird can sit there for a while, they often will recover from having bounced off the glass. But downtown, they have, minutes to or seconds to spare before something is going to either step on them, attack them, or harm them additionally, and which doesn't give them the time to recover as they might do in a safer space. So downtown is a deadly area for these birds to be injured.
And Annette, your group might be #1 in the country insofar as doing what you do. I was amazed that you told me that some people call you and they say they might save 10 or 12 birds every year, and you were saying you're saving how many every year?
Thousands. Yeah, we find
Thousands.
almost we recover thousands of birds, over 7,000 just in where we're looking. And our effort is really getting out there. And even then, we know we're not getting to everything, but we really are trying to be there when the birds need us. We know that bird strikes occur throughout the day, and we certainly don't have the resources to stay out 24 hours a day, but we have this network of people that will call us, as well as people who are available to run when we get reports during times when a bird is hurt and our teams are not downtown. We always need more volunteers. The more people we have, the more areas we can cover, the more places we can be at once, because every time you walk away from a building, you're kind of feeling that you're leaving it behind and that there are probably birds hitting that building as you walk off to check the next building. So it can be pretty continual. On our busiest days downtown, we had one morning in October when we rescued over 300 injured birds and collected 400 to 500 dead birds. We collected birds from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. that day. We had people stay downtown, and we sent cars. We fill a car up with the injured birds, and about 100 birds can fit in a car when you've got them all bagged up. And so we sent 3 to 4 trips out to the Willowbrook Wildlife Center, which is the largest rehabilitation facility in Northern Illinois that has veterinarians on staff, as well as wildlife specialists who can handle and have the resources and the qualifications to do the most responsible treatment of these birds, which can come in. As I said, on one day we sent them over 300 birds to evaluate. Hopefully many of them have recovered, haven't been gotten safely off the sidewalk and given the time to recuperate. It's better not to hold on to a bird for days and days. These wild birds are often, they do actually poorly being handled by people. So if they can recover and be released into the forest preserves out in DuPage, where they will hopefully not encounter as many, though we know there's buildings everywhere. They're not going to be in a glass and light free environment, but they at least have a forest preserve. We wouldn't want to release them back into the city where they're going to hit another building or not have the protection and cover of the wonderful resources that we have out in DuPage. And we're able to care for them. Some of them are released the same day. And many of them have to stay for treatment and with hopefully a second chance to go back in the wild and continue their migrations. The Lights Out program, as we spoke of earlier, is an initiative that's a voluntary program. We send out, coordinated through the Chicago Audubon Society, we send out a memo asking that birds turn their lights out. The city buildings turn their lights out from March 15th to June 15th after 11 p.m. So the city doesn't go completely dark. The way Earth Hour has that moment when everybody tries to turn on as many lights as you can. And what we're doing is asking buildings that have display lights, logos, brightly lit antenna, fixtures. The ring around the Hancock goes out. The light on the Willis Tower goes out. Any sort of logos that would cause this attraction to any particular area of downtown. We ask on a voluntary basis that buildings turn those lights out after 11 p.m. and that residents on any floor of a building that aren't using that area after 11 p.m. turn those lights out. Here's the new Salesforce building that has just opened this winter in downtown Chicago. That light is so bad. Anyone that owns a residential unit around that building has their home slash apartment floodlit by the Salesforce light, which just just by virtue of how it's upsetting people, the aldermen in the city have asked them to dim that. And it's March 15th, so we're going to be monitoring whether that building complies with the voluntary light reduction after 11 p.m. because that light would draw birds towards the Chicago River, which is where that building sits. Natural corridors like the Chicago River and the lakefront are where birds are going to spend their day and where they're going to want to come down. And we don't want to attract them toward the glass by this level of display lighting that we feel does not need to be on after 11 p.m. And certainly when we're talking about people's health and enjoyment of a darkened environment, this is not the direction we want to go with more lights. We want less lights. We want lights that are shielded and downward facing, that put light where people need it, but don't pour it up into the sky as a beacon that can be very deadly.
Yeah, it was people that, of course, had their circadian rhythm affected by that bright light coming in their residential homes downtown that voiced those complaints to the aldermen, and now the city's convinced Salesforce to at least take care of it somewhat. So hopefully there'll be some more optimism. And the Lights Out initiative is just not Chicago. Chicago is one of the pioneers, but it's spread to a lot of other cities, including Philadelphia recently, I believe, and Houston and some other cities. So, again, people are trying to take some action. You want to talk a little bit about the glass windows, Annette?
Yes, because with light reduction also must come protecting glass, because our environment, birds are going to settle into the city during the day between their migration periods, and they're going to encounter glass that looks reflective, glass that looks transparent. And we need to, we have developed a set of requirements that a building would have to be rated as a bird friendly building design. And we are asking the city of Chicago to require that any new building going forward meet these bird safety requirements. This would involve reduction in lighting and using glass that has some measure of visibility. When you put these dots, any kind of patterns that go 2 inches apart, you can't just put one big decal in the middle and say that the birds will avoid everything because they see a scary outline of a hawk or an eagle. That's a misconception. You really need a pattern that shows birds that there's something in their way every 2 inches, because a little bird can fit through any opening. That's how they get through branches. That's why you don't see birds running into tree trunks, because they know how to measure. I can fit through anything that's 2 inches wide. I know how to navigate with my wings, with my body size. So if they see any opening in glass that is bigger than 2 inches around, they are going to say, I can fit through that area. So you need a pattern like this particular dot pattern. There's glass that can put ultraviolet patterns that birds can see. There can be striping that's very subtle. And ultimately, when you back away from a building, it does not make your building look like it has leprosy, or that there's a problem with the stripes, or that there's that all of a sudden every building is covered with a sheet of paper. It can be a very subtle design that birds have an awareness and avoid, but that does not disrupt our want to have windows. We're not saying that buildings have to be built all out of brick. We can use safer kinds of glass, and we're hoping that Chicago will implement these bird requirements. The ones that we wrote were adopted within the last year by the village of Skokie and Evanston. So they are requiring that their new buildings have designs going forward. This still doesn't stop the buildings that exist. Every year that Chicago delays putting this into effect, new buildings go up, that for the hundreds of years that building is in existence, the decades that it's in existence, will be killing birds. So we want this in place yesterday, and the sooner the better, because we not only have to face new buildings being safe, we have to at some point address the issue of what about the buildings that are already there. And if you don't build your building safe, the cost to make a building with these bird safe products can be really very minimal, sometimes even at no extra cost, and the more glass products that are safe. But if you try to fix it afterwards and say, well, let's just build it and see what happens, you put up regular glass, you're getting collisions. To go back afterwards and retrofit can be almost uh, double the cost or almost a replacement cost of the building, and no one's going to go back and rebuild a building or redesign a building. So it's too late. If you incorporate these costs into your initial design that have these types of glass, types of arrangements of building features, you can, with very little cost, make a building safe. But it's astronomical, no pun intended, to try to make a building safe after it's been built, because then you're dealing with trying to add window film 50 stories up. No one's going to be able to get up 50 stories to add that pattern onto the glass. If they do, it's going to, cost an enormous amount of labor and maintenance to it. So it is better to build right from the start.
Yeah, before I move on to a little example about what we can do at home. Just this past fall, the Illinois legislature did pass an act known as the Bird Safe Buildings Act. Now, it applies only to state buildings, but it is a good step forward encouraging state construction, state improvement to incorporate glass similar to what you're seeing here, or other types of glass into the new buildings, which does not cost more money at the front end. So that, of course, we have less birds colliding with state buildings. Hopefully it'll move on to, of course, private buildings, commercial buildings.
People
So
ask what they can do about their own homes, and there are, you can add external screens. In my home, I put in new windows, and my screens are on the outside, so birds are hitting the screens or landing on them rather than striking the glass. You can add window films that replicate those dot patterns or lines. You could do something as simple as this. This is a product called Nacopian Bird Saver. It's really just a line of parachute cord, a heavy corded rope that then every 2 to 3 inches has a hanging section to it that puts something between birds and the glass. Birds see those hanging cords. I've hung wind socks, decorative ribbons in front of the windows that birds have been hitting. They see those cords, they see the ribbons, they see what you put in front of the glass as something they can't fly through or between, so they're not going to make it to the glass. So adding things on the surface of your glass. Drawing drapes is not often enough from the inside. If you put your decals, you have to put one every 2 inches. That's a lot of decals. It's much better to do an all-encompassing display of ribbons. These will protect, will give birds something to see and avoid. You can do it yourself. They'll make them for you to fit your windows. Here's someone that has just simply put hanging ribbons in front of these sliding glass doors. Birds coming towards this patio are going to have things in their way that cause them not to go full tilt into the glass. That would be fatal or injurious to them if they were to get as far as the glass window. So if you go to our webpage or the American Bird Conservancy, we've put up the link to, it's called abc.org. They show you all different products. They show you different ways they've been used. They show you some comparisons as to how big a solution. Some solutions are lower in effectiveness and some are higher. So it's called a threat factor. So the lower your number is, if you have a brick wall, you're a threat factor of 1. If you are a mirror, you're at 100. So you're trying to find a solution that'll make your windows something which would be a threat factor of under 30, ideally. The lower the number you can get for what you've used on your window, the more effective and safer it will be for birds.
All right, well, thanks, Annette. We're going to talk a little bit more at the end, I'm sure. So now I'm going to move through, hopefully quickly, because I'm sure a lot of you have questions, a little bit more about birds, but from the perspective of how important our insects are. I know I've talked about this book every time that we've had a seminar previously. I just think it's a tremendous book, Nature's Best Hope by Doug Talamy. If you haven't read it, go out and read it. It emphasizes, how important, of course, our entire environment is, not just for us, but the birds and the insects and everything else here on our planet. Not only do we have a big concern about a bird apocalypse, but we have a big concern about insect apocalypse. And why is that important? Well, for so many reasons, including, of course, your native plants. Insects feed so many things, including birds. I wanted to share this slide with you. This is something that's horrific, something that's new. This picture was taken about a month ago out in Kane County with the St. Charles Park District known as Hickory Knolls. There's a youth center out there, kind of a boys' prison, that has very large light poles, and they had the old sodium fixtures up for the longest time. Well, they just in November converted to these white LEDs. Okay, we were talking about the white blue light previously. Look at this. This is horrific.
That's a
It's
nighttime bird walk. So and it looks like they are walking in full daylight. This is a nighttime bird or nature walk.
Look how that light is going into this nature area, well into the forest, well into where insects are, well into where birds are, and of course plants too, which are affected by this bright white light at night. And I wanted to show this caterpillar picture because there's a recent study that shows that caterpillars that are exposed to these bright white lights at night are subjected to so much more predation. So, you know, not only are moths flying around lights and getting tired and dying when they would otherwise be pollinating at night, you know, with the idea that a lot of our pollinators are nocturnal, they're getting picked off by predators, you know, before they even get to that phase where they're able to pollinate your plants. And of course, as I've kind of said already, moths are bird food. Most fledglings eat only caterpillars. It goes down their throat so much more easily. So the birds are out looking for these caterpillars, moth caterpillars mostly. And of course, if there's less moth caterpillars, there's less food for the fledglings, etc. So turn the lights off because nighttime kills moths, please. And we'll miss them when they're gone because of course we won't have the food. You know, without the pollinators, we don't have food on the table. So let's talk real quickly. We're running a little bit late. Let's talk real quickly about how we can make a difference. We've been talking about bird migration. We got 15 million birds predicted to be migrating just tonight. That number will explode quickly. Annette, can you explain real quick why we might have more birds migrating on a certain night?
Yeah, we watch for birds to come through the Chicago area in the spring when there's winds from the south and the southeast, because the majority of birds that come through Chicago come from the Texas, Florida, Gulf Coast area, and the southeast winds push them forward. It saves them some energy. If there's a strong north wind, that's extra energy. Nobody wants to fly into a headwind. So it's very advantageous when there's a south wind. So we watch the weather a lot, and we watch these predictions of showing birds moving in our direction in order to calculate when we're worried that birds have their highest risk to be passing through urban areas.
And we can have 300 or more million birds migrating during any single night, if I'm not mistaken, depending on the conditions.
Exactly. It's what goes on that we don't see at night is amazing and little understood, but we're gaining more and more information on what happens.
Right. So here's the theme, everybody. So the most important thing that we can do is, of course, turn off the lights at night, whether we're in the city or we're in the suburbs or whatever the case may be, because we want to encourage those birds to stay up in the sky and to, with the energy that they're storing during the day, you know, make it safely, whether they're going north or they're going south. So turn off those lights when you can at 11 o'clock, if not sooner, before you go to bed. If we need to keep our lights on at night, and some of us do because of security reasons or whatever the case may be, let's remember to have them shielded well. We want to have a fixture that's going to bring that light down at a 45-degree angle. You know, but a lot of our fixtures are going to allow that light to go out. We prefer that not be the case, and certainly we don't want that light going up. Light will reflect down, and we're going to talk about that a little bit with the bright white and brightness. But, you know, when you do have an opportunity to get a new fixture, think about something that's going to keep that light shielded to the ground where we want it, where we need it. I know a lot of you have seen this slide before, but this is from my local Home Depot. You can see to the left what is a dark sky friendly fixture. Basically, we don't really want to see the bulb. Okay. We can have all that light coming down without seeing the bulb. For some reason, we look at bulbs now as ornamental. They can still be ornamental, but let's keep them in a good fixture. And again, getting back to that LED, we want to stay away from anything more than warm white. So when you look at the package, you'll see a K. That's a Kelvin score. That's basically a color temperature. Whether we're inside the house, especially at night before we go to bed with our handheld device or whatever the case may be, we don't want that brighter white inside. That's that wavelength that's been introduced to us now with these LEDs that we didn't have before. And that's what's affecting our melatonin release. That's what's affecting, of course, a lot of things, including, you know, our ability to see those stars well at night. And here's just a nice little demonstration. Stay down here with that 2000. Really don't tiptoe into 3000 if you don't need to. So this is from Home Depot again, just an example of a box of bulbs that you can choose from. Typically there's 4 bulbs in these boxes. Look for the orange label, the soft white. You'll see a yellow label. You'll see a blue label, regardless of the manufacturer. Especially for outdoor lights, stay away from anything that has a yellow label or a blue label. You can look at the little menu box on the back and you'll see actually a K score. Look for 2700 K or less. And keep the brightness down. Keep it at about 460 outside, nothing more than 800. Okay, and that's we kind of look at that from a watts perspective. Now, watts really isn't a good measure for these bulbs, but look for 40 watt or 60 watt at most, you know, if you're not familiar with lumens, but there will be a lumen measurement on these packages. So stay low with lumens. That's the brightness. The more bright, the more reflection you're going to get into the sky. So it's not just the color, it's the brightness, it's the lumens that you want to bring down. And if you got a little extra money, now these bulbs are still a little bit more expensive, but the price is getting better. The quality is getting better. LED technology is just getting better and better and better every day. Think about the 2200 bulbs, especially if you've got the coach lamps or something. You're not yet, you know, spending the money to convert to the shielded fixtures. So if you can see the bulb, you know, think about a bulb like this. Very attractive, very ornamental. I see a lot of people turning to this bulb now. It's even more that amber color, and you're keeping that brightness down. So even if you're not shielding it well, at least you don't have that bright white wavelength as part of your bulb outside. Okay, and you're being less bright. This is probably the best option right now for us commercially. And just a nice example about, you know, the 2700 or less Kelvin, less bright, and a nice fixture. And of course, ultimately, we'd like to have less light trespass. Think about your own house, maybe. You know, are you lighting up your neighbor's house? Is your neighbor looking at your lights in his or her bedroom? You know, we kind of look at that thing with respect to how light is coming into our house. So think about how you're affecting your neighbor too. And look at that fixture, look at that color, look at that brightness, and everybody benefits. And of course, turn it off if you can. New book out, Darkness Manifesto. Wonderful book, talks about the entire wavelength of our environment. Okay, birds, turtles, glowworms, fireflies. This guy goes through it all. Okay, nice book, quick read, talks about night ecology, sometimes known as scotobiology. So good book to pick up. And here we are. Annette, do you want to, could you share with us where we can maybe make a donation if we want to your wonderful group?
Our group just became a 501c3 public charity. We are all self-funded. We do not have any agency that helps support us, and we operate through the generous donations of the public to get our educational materials, our rescue materials, all the other expenses that go into getting the thousands of birds that we're trying to find help for. And you could go to our webpage, which would be birdmonitors.net. I think someone has put that into the chat, and there's a location you could donate online to us. We always need volunteers because hands-on help is also critical to rescue these birds, as well as move these birds to all the places they need to go. It's a very rewarding task if it's a volunteer opportunity where we have young people, old people, families with their retired people who have time, families that bring their children who get some real up close rewarding experiences, knowing that you're making a difference helping these birds through everything as simple as driving a bird someplace, to picking it up or to being the person that runs after it and catches it within that to get it safe. So please join us or donate to our work. It helps us continue one of the most successful efforts in the country to bring help and awareness to what's happening to birds that we love, enjoy, and most definitely need for the healthy environment we rely on.
Well, thank you, Annette. Your boots on the ground, and I certainly appreciate that. You know, I talk to everybody from my office, and once in a while go out and speak, but I'm not up at 4:30 in the morning doing what you're doing and going out on cold ponds during the winter. So kudos to you. Thanks so much for doing that. So we're at the end. This again is the mothership website. Please go there. You'll see so many tremendous things about light pollution generally, about its effects on wildlife and so on and so forth. And again, let me remind you, although I think it is on chat, that we now have a Chicago chapter. It's known as www.idachicago.org. Again, if you got a chance, go to that website. I think you'll very much enjoy it. So Catherine, I'm going to stop my share.
You can leave your lovely photo on if you want, but we do have some questions for you guys if you don't mind.
We'd love to have a few.
Okay, so Kathy with a K, not a C, asked, what can we do to help as a suburban homeowner? What can we do to encourage buildings downtown to turn their lights off? Picket, stomp their feet, throw rocks? What do we do?
Well, there may come a time right now we have a pretty good voluntary cooperation. It's pretty cool to be downtown around 11 o'clock when a lot of lights go out and the skyline does go dark. It doesn't go completely dark. We have new buildings though sometimes that are not willing to turn their lights out, and we sometimes put out alerts to ask people to approach the companies that are not being part of this to turn their lights out. It's as I said before, it's a challenging thing to offer. I was approached by the folks in Detroit that said that they're not getting any of their buildings willing to turn their lights out because they feel that leaving lights on at night is a mark of prosperity. And a city that's lit up all night is a prosperous city. And I felt like saying that Detroit has got a lot of problems about being prosperous, and leaving lights on is not going to be what makes or breaks them as far as renewing their city. So we hope that people get away from that idea, and that people start knowing that there's that darkness has a value to it, as opposed to the flashy appeal of lights. That it's kind of there's a movie out called The City Dark. If anyone has seen that movie, have you seen it, Adam? The City Dark?
I have not.
Oh my goodness, you have to see it. It's a independent film where they came to Chicago, they feature Chicago, and they talk about Chicago bird collision monitors, as well as just everything that you spoke of is the loss of the night sky. And they talk about one of the people quoted in it says that future generations are going to look back at us and say, what were you doing, putting all this light out, and why didn't you understand the benefits that everyone would gain from it? So I'd recommend that movie highly if someone would like to see all that was discussed here highlighted as far as darkness and the tragic loss of night skies.
It's
will
pretty
check it
amazing that we've been convinced over decades that to show prosperity, you have to have a massive lawn and tons of light on around your house all night.
It's the excessive use of everything that shows prosperity, and it's hopefully the world is moving to a better understanding of a balance.
lights on our houses, lights in our trees, for some reason we want, even though people are in bed, we want to light up everything. So the random person that
house
might
has
drive
to
by
look
at
in-
3 a.m.
That
Yeah.
house has to look elegant even while you're sleeping.
Yeah, and you're so true. You're so true about the lawns. I'm glad you brought that up, Catherine. I'm glad to see that more people are moving away, more no-mow efforts, more native plants in lieu of lawns. Tremendously important. And of
Mhm.
course, Doug Talamy talks about that too, with the homegrown.
Yes, you're right. I'm glad you recommended that book. Nobody can say it like he can.
Yeah, more questions maybe?
So Annette, there's another Annette out there somewhere who said, in Riviera Beach, Florida, near West Palm Beach, it is illegal for condos facing the ocean to leave lights on at night during turtle egg laying season. This protects the green turtles to be able to come on shore and lay their eggs. Condo owners obey this law. Is there any movement that you know of to creating laws in Chicago for condos or business buildings other than the Illinois buildings to turn off lights during migration?
Well, the Lights Out program, the voluntary program, is asking people to do this. It's not currently mandated. The new sustainability requirements are going to ask that buildings have their lights out after 11 p.m. again for the bird protection, similar to what's going on. The situation in Florida with the sea turtles is the classic example of how important it is and how the market will follow. Not only that, they also require a kind of a glass that has low emittance so that light does not pour out. Besides turning your lights out, you also aren't allowed to have glass that could allow light to come out. And a whole set of glass was developed. They call it turtle glass, which, because the laws required people don't let light out onto the beach, companies made glass that was safer for turtles. If we have laws that require that buildings have to be bird friendly, companies will develop bird-friendly glass. Right now, there aren't as many bird-friendly products and the prices are higher. But the minute there's requirements for bird-friendly glass, more people will get into the market, the prices will go down, it'll be more commonly available, and that will drive the whole sequence of things being available and more commonly used. Right now, if you don't require it, as Florida does for the glass and the reduced lighting, it's not happening. So the safer lighting and glass will come very importantly when there's more legislation that requires it. That is very important.
Yeah, the history with that a little bit, we do usually talk about turtles with my presentations is, like anything else, we've been here for so long, we've always had a night, we've always had a day. So when the turtles hatch, usually at night, because of course they want to avoid predation, they're looking for the brightest thing in the sky. And typically that's the light on the ocean, whether from stars or the moon or whatever the case may be. So they would typically go to the ocean. But now, of course, the brighter light is the light on the street with the street lamps, or the light across the street with the condominiums, or whatever the case may be.
Or the parking lot that's full of lit up cars. Yeah.
Yes. So kudos to Florida, to and other places too around the world that are now trying to address this with improved lighting, better lighting. Another question, Catherine?
So we have a couple people that have asked about, one person asked, are the amber colored light bulbs still available for purchase? And somebody else Annette referencing that Doug Talamy says to use a yellow LED outdoor bulb. Do you agree?
Yeah, so actually the best bulb is a bulb that's currently sold for night lights in the baby's room in the nursery. That filters out the blue-white light the best. But otherwise, if you're looking for something at the store that you can buy readily, that 2700 Kelvin, it's more of an amber color, or even better going down to that 2200, which is even more amber. You're not going to find the incandescents anymore. The Tommy heads that we used to have in the house, you're just not going to find them. You're not going to find the CFLs anymore. So you're pretty much limited to LEDs. So again, look for that more amber color, that orange label, the 2200 and less.
So Adam, there have been some studies that claim yellow light is actually more disruptive to sleep than blue light. What are your thoughts about that?
I am not aware of those studies. There are some studies that show that not all amber bulbs are created equal. But I'm not aware of any studies that the best light is red light. Sincerely, if we were to choose something other than yellow, we would want to go with red. We want to get away from that white blue wavelength. We want to filter that out, but I'm not familiar with too many studies that address that. Mary, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are. We can, I just Google. There seems to be a little bit of controversy over that, but I'm with you. You know, when I'm in the middle of the night, when I get up, if I have a clock that has a blue light or a green light, I cannot look at it. I can't change my thermostat because of its green light at nighttime. But the red light, I can look at a clock with a red light, and I'm fine getting back to sleep again. So
Yeah, so when we go out on night hikes, we take a flashlight that has that red light. Because it's just so much better. Generally, it doesn't affect the wildlife. You can walk around outside with a red flashlight and the wildlife won't scatter as readily. So if you want to see something at night, you're going to want to have a red light flashlight.
never even occurred to me that there was such a thing. So
And Kathy also mentioned, or get motion sensors. If you don't want to do that, get motion sensors.
Yeah, security is a big issue for a lot of people. Okay, I get it. But we can still have better lighting design, and certainly motion sensors are part of that. So if you're concerned about somebody entering your property, you can have a motion sensor now that will not sense somebody walking on the sidewalk. They're much better today. So once somebody enters your property, starts to look at your garage or look at your house, that light will come on. And the good thing about it is it'll come off quickly. So if it was just, a random whatever, it'll turn off. So motion sensors are a much better option now, much more efficient.
So someone is putting a plug in for the Indiana Dunes Birding Festival taking place from May 11th to 14th. One session is given by Sam Corbo about nocturnal flight counts, as was mentioned in the beginning of this presentation.
Annette, do you know anything about that by chance?
That's a great festival. Yeah, no, I definitely, I recommend it. I'm usually busy collecting birds, so I don't get out to some of the festivals, but yeah, I would recommend that. And we're currently working on Cornell is setting up something to kind of give an image of what kind of birds come over at night by putting some auditory microphones up, because you could actually run bird sounds through a kind of a spectrogram analysis, and different birds have a different frequency of call. So you can estimate what, even though it's dark, you can estimate what's flying overhead by analyzing the sound recordings that you take on birds overnight. So that's a whole other way to understand what's happening up in the sky. I see a question down here. I kind of looked at the chat myself, saying that architects tilt building glass so glare isn't as harsh to help prevent bird strikes. Angling glass helps. The reason I think that angling glass works is not so much the glare, but if you have glass right in front of you, it makes a mirror that you see. If it's tilted, you're coming towards something that has more substance to it, and you're not looking straight on an image of a tree. The reflection isn't right in front of you. So by tilting it, you don't make these direct mirror reflections, and you also aren't having this head-on right in front of you. It's like you're more looking up at the sky or looking down at the ground, and birds aren't flying towards a ground image. They want to fly toward an image of a straight on tree or something that looks right in front of them. So angling glass can prevent that confusion of there's something wide open in front of me. They see something that's in their way. So that is the reason that angled glass is part of good building design as well. And some buildings have incorporated that. That's no extra cost. Once again, not a different kind of glass, just a different way you position the glass.
Annette asked, are there any similar organizations that are looking at suburban buildings, like what's being monitored in Chicago?
We don't have any currently. Some of our volunteers are looking pretty heavily on an industrial corridor in DuPage along Warrenville Road, which there isn't any place in the suburbs that could not have bird strikes because of a lot of glass that's incorporated into office parks. We don't have, some of our volunteers are doing this on a sort of an independent basis, and we're on a couple of different college campuses. We're starting a monitoring program at the College of DuPage. Colleges, we monitor at Northwestern University up in Evanston, because universities often have beautifully landscaped areas with the combination of buildings that have lights on all night because students are up all night, and the combination of a lot of glass design. So they can be really ground zero for a lot of birds. So we have Loyola University's Lakefront campus, Evanston's campus, University of Chicago, as well as now the College of DuPage are starting to have people go out and monitor the buildings with the idea that if we can identify, maybe we can't fix every building, but if we can identify areas of high concentrated strikes, we may be able to afford or be willing to retrofit. Because I said retrofit is an enormous thing. If we asked every building in existence to retrofit, it would be in the billions of dollars, and no one is going to do that. It's not going to be considered reasonable, even though I'd like to see it happen, because to me these birds are not expendable. But if we can find serious areas of injury and fix those, we can at least make progress toward reducing bird injury and death.
Now, I have,
Our suburbs aren't dark anymore, Catherine, as we know, with
no,
the white LEDs. It's becoming, it's not just
No.
Chicago anymore. It's
No.
it's
not at
spreading.
all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And, and speaking of the suburbs, you have, isn't it true that when I was speaking to you at Wild Things, you have volunteers that will, if somebody finds an injured bird, even in the suburbs, you have volunteers throughout the Chicago area that they can call if they look on the website for how to reach you?
Exactly. Yeah. If people call us, our helpline responds to things in a multi-county area, because we know that bird collisions don't just happen downtown. And sometimes people can at least get the bird safe, but they can't transport it. They can let us know their location. Sometimes it's every case is different. Sometimes right now we've got a bird that hit down in Palos Park this evening, and someone is getting it as far as someone who lives near the rehab center for tomorrow morning, because sometimes strikes occur when the rehab centers aren't open, but we can always get birds safely contained. We are always looking for, sometimes it's transport, sometimes it's people who are at their offices and they can't take the bird somewhere. And if you live or work in a location that you think there's a problem, we are also able to come out and maybe do an audit or an assessment of what looks like the worst part of your building and what can be done. So Chicago Bird Collision Monitors is available to come out and look at a particular problem area that you have a concern for, and perhaps offer suggestions that you may need to work on your office building management to see if they'll be willing to entertain making a modification. Or it could be just somebody's home. We went out to Oakton College the other day, and they actually had external shades that they could pull down in the morning hours. They had this whole bank of glass windows that birds were hitting, and it turned out they had shades that if someone thought to drop them, they were external to the glass, put them in front of that glass every morning when no one was really even using that area. There was a solution that was just waiting to be used, but someone hadn't really looked at it in that sense. So we can come out and help give suggestions that might be already ready to be available and helping prevent strikes in some cases.
Willowbrook is in Glen Ellen on Park, just south of Roosevelt Road, just north of Morton Arboretum. And most birds will rest quietly inside a secured bag. And you can, if you can't reach a net or whatever the case may be, if you're in the Glen Ellen area, Wheaton area, whatever the case may be, you can take those birds over to Willowbrook, and Willowbrook will accept them. Sparrows might be an exception, but they will accept those birds. So Willowbrook is a direct option if you're in that area.
Yep, if you find a bird in your home. So always call us for advice. We can tell you whether that bird could rest and potentially recover, whether you need help catching it because it's a little too active, or if we'll coach you through containing that bird, and then we'll work out what the transport evaluation options are so that bird gets its best second chance.
So if everybody wants to be more conscientious during bird migration season, what are the key dates of the spring and then the fall migration seasons?
Mid-March to mid-June. So downtown, the Lights Out program is March 15th to June 15th. And in the fall, it's August 15th. Birds start moving south for the winter as early as August. So August 15th to November 15th Those are times when you minimize the amount of light you have coming out of your home, and putting up protections. Because if you can't permanently change your windows or put external screens, I had people that just put soap on the outside of their window for the most critical month of May. Yeah, it makes your window a little messy, but for those 30 days, birds are safe, and then you can wipe it off afterwards. You can hang up banners for a couple months for April and May to protect your windows, and take those down. There are some buildings that just put up temporary screen. The Chicago Botanic Gardens has reflective glass on many of their buildings that were killing lots of birds, because it looked like there was a whole second garden that you could see in the windows reflected. They simply put up temporary external netting that they stretch in front of the glass, about 5 inches off the surface of the glass. It still allows people to look out the windows from the inside, because you don't want to stop people from enjoying the view from inside your home or building. And it just looks like there's a screen, and we can all look through screens, but it gives birds a barrier between them and the glass. And they do that temporarily 4 months out of the year, April and May and September and October. They put up this screening that prevents bird strikes, and they're none the worse for wear. Their building is still usable, enjoyable, and the birds can enjoy the garden, which is why all those plants are there in the first place, is to promote a healthy and enjoyable botanic experience. So we want the birds to enjoy it without being put at risk.
Adam,
Okay,
Janet is looking for a brief statement that she can pass on to her neighbors to promote dark nights, with a focus on dark nights versus turn off your bright lights.
She's looking for a brief statement from me.
Yes,
a good talking point.
yes. How do we talk to our neighbors?
Well, so if you go to the www.idachicago.org site, in the memories section, you will see my 3 letters to my neighbors. And there is also a YouTube video of me called Letters to Your Neighbors that has been watched, I think, almost 600 times, that I presented to the Global IDA wonderful seminar that is attended globally last year. So go to that on YouTube, just Adam Kreuzer, and you'll find Letters to the Neighbor. So watch that video. Look for my letters on www.IDA Chicago. You know, try not to be confrontational. Be pleasant. Talk about how it's affecting pollinators. Talk how it's affecting their own personal health. You'll see in those letters, there's a lot of examples. So that's my best statement for tonight.
And this may be a little bit, but this is going back to that poor eagle you showed, Annette. And you said that it did end up passing away because it was lead poisoning and rodenticide.
Rodenticide, yes.
And I just wanted, because we have a member and volunteer who's present with us tonight, and she has dedicated a lot of time. She had a very similar thing with happened to a bird in her yard, and it was rodenticide. And so she goes around and she's trying to raise awareness about the problems of what we're using in our suburbs to eliminate mice and rats. And do you have any suggestion of a safe method if homeowners are trying to squelch a mouse problem or a rat problem, whatever? Do you have like a safer alternative that's not going to affect our birds?
Yes, we're currently getting ready to do a kind of a campaign in the city talking about really the uptick in the number of birds that went to Willowbrook this year that died or were sick from eating something that had eaten rat poison or rodent poisons. That number continues to increase. Rats and rodents tend to become somewhat immune to some of the levels of poison, so they're upping the toxicity of some of these rat poisons, and that is even more strongly affecting the birds that end up eating them. Now, there's live trapping, there's blocking off access. It's the traditional things of using a live trap to catch the mice, using exclusion by making sure that wherever those rodents are coming in, they can't come in. There's the idea of sealing off garbage and food sources. There are some natural herbal things that will sometimes keep rodents away. They have varying levels of toxicity, of efficacy is what I want to say. So the different ones of them. I've heard that putting dryer sheets around areas keep certain rodents away. So looking for some of the more natural causes. We don't have anything up on our webpage, but there are alternate rodent controls that we're trying to put in place. Evanston is trying to work on something where they can try to decrease the amount of municipal use of some of the rodent poisons, which really are cats outdoors is not a solution. People say that, well, I'll control my rats by putting more cats around. The average cat does not get, certainly to rats, because any self-respecting cat probably wouldn't take on the level of and even some of the poisons are said that the rats have become clever enough to avoid eating them. So that's not really the most effective way. It's a lot of exclusion. It's a lot of trying to dry up the food sources that might be attracting rats, so that we can prevent what's becoming a ever increasing problem for the additional consequences of this poison going into our environment.
And if it's gonna hurt the birds of prey, it's gonna hurt your dog or your cat that eats,
Exactly.
you know.
And glue traps are not a solution either. I mean, they don't have toxicity, but I can't tell you the number of unfortunate birds, small mammals, snakes, insects that get into glue traps. It's cruel even to the mouse or the rodent that you're wanting to get rid of, because it's just essentially, holds on to the animal until it starves or dies. And it's once a bird is stuck on a glue trap, we can often get them off the glue trap, but the stress and the trauma of cleaning that adhesive off of them often kills them. And we find a lot of small, especially I dread when the songbirds are coming through, they're small and they're foraging on the ground, and that's where we're putting these glue traps. And we found a number of just very sadly alive, but unremovably trapped onto glue trap little birds. So it's not a good solution either. So that we discourage people from using that. We found snakes, which are a healthy part of the environment, stuck on glue traps, amphibians, small animals. It's not a good and easily repaired. If something gets stuck on one of those, they're pretty doomed when they get onto a glue trap. So looking for those non-lethal pest control removal is something we're looking for. We're looking to find the best solutions for people, because we understand the need to control pests that are invading areas that we don't need them in.
Well, that is it with our questions. I want to thank both of you again. Thank you for presenting tonight. This was just a wonder. We're getting, tons of compliments. What a great presentation this was. Thank you so much for this, but also thank you both for all that you do out in the community, trying to raise awareness and, make our environment a healthier place for us all. And helping
Thanks for
our
inviting
poor,
us.
cute little birds. Oh.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting us every year now, again for 3 years, Catherine and Mary. It's just
We're gonna keep
tremendous
doing this. We
opportunity.
want the word out there. I mean, it's not, we can plant native till, but there's a big picture, and you can't do one thing and not look at the other thing. I mean, this has all got to come together if we're really going to make a big difference.
That's exactly true. One
very
of the things I wanted to say that's come up a lot in the collision discussions is that attracting birds to an area. We say this to buildings downtown. If you're going to put a lovely garden next to your building, that's the glass you have to protect the most. You may have 50 stories of glass, but the most dangerous glass is the glass right where you're inviting the birds to spend their time. So if you make a lovely backyard full of native plants and don't protect the glass windows that face that, you are essentially inviting birds to a place where they're going to get hurt or killed. So really paying attention to protecting glass near any area that we want to welcome birds is the most critical place to make a solution or a protection for them. So always keep that in mind with anything you do with plants, because that's some people are saying we should just pave everything over so that birds just fly over and don't want to spend any time here with no plants. And we don't want to live in that kind of world that's all paved over, but we have to make those planting areas safe with the glass that's nearby.
Right. And we want to plant the native plants to give them the caterpillars they need to reproduce, but we don't want them to reproduce and then those poor offspring hit a building when they go to migrate.
exactly, because that's the first thing they might see.
And Adam, I'm gonna reach out to you because I'd love to have a combined effort dark sky event down here in the southwest burbs.
Just let me know.
In our Payless Dark Sky zone.
Reserve, sure, yeah. Well, I'd love to do it. So send me an email and we'll make it happen.
Wonderful. All right, thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Annette. You're wonderful, and thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you on May 3rd for Benjamin Vogt, our next webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.